Stop trying to make your name off Italians. And this is my rat, Frank Gangi, coming to my defense. You also had John Jute. We're getting cut off. I'll get back to you on the A-Light.
This is Erica Patera, and I'm back with my father, Tommy Patera. Go ahead and start talking.
Okay, let's get back to what left off yesterday. One, I think I made it crystal clear that John Gotti did not break up furniture and screaming in the Bergen Hunt and Fish Club that he wants Willie Boy dead, dead, dead. I think I made it crystal clear that Phil Carlo never got his ass in his wheelchair to the Bergenite Hunt and Fish Club. He doesn't even know John Gotti. Already John Gotti's friends. And in that case, I don't even think he never went into the Ravenite Social Club. I don't even think he got his wheelchair and went up and down Mulberry Street, because it would have got back to me. Now, other than that's bad, let's back to Agent Hunt. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with Agent Hunt's finger. And he has the gun, the bullets, and he has the balls to put 6 holes in your chest and you get into a shootout with him. Now, when I do see Jamie, I'm going to tell him, Jamie, your grandfather was a cop, your father was a cop, you're a cop. For all we know, your sister Colleen could be married to a cop, and you get on that stand and you perjure yourself. When you were asked if Frank Gangi was source ACI2, you turned around and said no. Why? Because you don't want to drop the case. I want to see that I walk out of that courtroom. That's what you should have said. You should have said, whoa, my grandfather was a cop. I'm cop. I'm not perjured myself. That's what you should have, Jamie. Now, with another agent, an FBI agent by the name of Chris Farvo. Now, when Chris Farvo's rapt informant, Richard Esposito, was involved in a murder, Farvo didn't cover for him. He shelved he shelved his rat, and Richard Esposito's right now serving a life sentence for the murder. And guess who comes to Esposito's defense? FBI agent Roy Lindley Del Vecchio. This Scarpa's control agent, and most likely this is Frank Gangi's control agent. Well, Del Vecchio comes over and says Esposito had no choice but to kill this individual. Otherwise, the bosses would have killed him. But Farvo and the Justice Department wasn't going for that, because the Justice Department will never allow or give the okay for an informant to commit murder just to make a case. Except that's for this reason why I'm saying it's a little hush-hush with me. And it will come out that Frank Gangi committed 6 murders while he was an FBI informant, and Joe Senator committed 1 murder while he was Agent Hunt's DEA informant. Now, let's talk about this. Let's talk about this goddamn Hunt claiming that I committed 60 murders. 60 murders? There won't be anybody left 60 murders. But why don't they reveal the names of the so-called 60 victims and these mob-controlled hits that went down? Let them name the location, when, time, place. They can't, because it don't exist. Now, another thing. Hunt's trying to come up with this bullshit about me bringing in massive amounts of heroin in from Canada. Well, why did they make it? Why did he make a major bust? I was not. They don't even have me being in possession of a marijuana cigarette. Now, they have all this speculation and conjecture of me and Eddie Leno. I was never charged with any murders with Eddie Leno. I was never involved in any drug dealing with Eddie Leno. Again, in that joke of a book, you have Hunt saying that me and the Bananos family, whoever they are, was supplied the Eddie Leno, I guess, and the Gamdinos with heroin. Give me a break. Now, let's move on. All right, I think I covered myself with Hunt and with Eddie Leno and with John Gotti. Let's move on. Now, this Still Carlo. Let's talk about sit-downs, which Still Carl's trying to make herself that he's coming off as his so-called mob expert, which meanwhile He doesn't even notice, but what details that go in when you have these sit-downs. He mentions a guy by the name of Louis Bopp, who supposedly was Arthur Governella's brother. This call is from a federal prison. It was Arthur Governella's brother who Frank Ganji, Billy Bright, supposedly murdered. Now, Arthur Governero, after he shot 6 times and runs through a window, jumps to a window, he runs to a police car and he says, Billy Bright and Frank Ganji did this to me. Now, that's a dying declaration. Now, Arthur Governero's a rat, and that nobody is going to sit down for a rat. Keep this Arthur Governero could have been 100% right. And he could have turned around and said, Billy and Frank Ganji were going to rip me off and they merged me. But once he went to that NYTD patrol car and said Frank Ganji and Billy Bright shot me, that's it. There ain't going to be no sit-downs. Now, I don't know who this Arthur, this Louis Bopp is. And first of all, so-called didn't say he was a made member or anything. So one, he cannot mediate for himself. He would have to have another made member sit down with him. Now, let's talk about this with this so-called ridiculous sit-down that never happened. He has Ross Ganji, who is an alleged captain in the Genovese family, sitting down at this sit-down that never happened. And he also had Anthony Spiro, who's a alleged boss of the Banana family, sitting at this sit-down. What? That would have never happened. First of all, it goes in stages. First, you would have to have a made member speaking on this Louis Bopp's behalf, because Louis Bopp is not a made member. He cannot speak for himself. He can't present his case to himself. And then you would have the individual, the other made member, who's sitting down for Frank Ganji and Billy Bright. And it would not be Russ Ganji, because Russ Ganji's alleged captain. Now, after these two so-called made members have the sit-down and they cannot come to an agreement, then they would go to the captains. Then the captains would go sit down. Now, if the captains cannot come to an agreement, then it would go to someone like Anthony Spiro. And if the bosses can't come to an agreement, then it would go to the commission, and the commission would have the final word. Now, as I'm pointing this out, Giz still call, don't know the particulars, don't know the details, but he wants to mislead all his readers that he's this so-called mob expert, and this sit-down that never happened. Like I said, he's his brother gave a dying declaration, and that's that. Nobody's sitting down for a rap. Now, what the hell is going on in the streets? Getting who's supposedly in the light, getting shot up, and then he goes over to the cops and say, Billy Bright and Frank Ganji killed me. What happened to the days let's say the days of the 1920s? Let's take Frank Gusenberg of the St. Valentine Day Massacre. This guy shot up. The detectives go up to him and says, Frank, you're not going to make it, Frank. Your brother's dead, Frank. They're all dead, Frank. Who did this to you, Frank? Nobody, he says. Frank, you're not going to let them get away with this, Frank. Frank, leave me alone. What happened to those guys? Dutch Schultz, shot to ribbons. Once again, leave me alone. What happened to those guys? What happened to those Dutch street code? Arnold Rothstein, shot in the stomach, lingering for 2 days. Same situation. Don't give nobody up. What happened to those days? My niece tells me that they don't even wait for the detectives. They're giving people up in the ambulance. I don't know what's going out there. I've been down 35 years. I don't know what's going out there, but I don't know. And then let's take another ridiculous sit-down that still Carl says happened that never happened. He says there was a sit-down between me, this Carl is from a federal prison, me and John Scotty Jr. Once again, Phil Caldo, no John Gotti Jr. He never spoke to John Jr. He never hung out with John Jr. But meanwhile, he wants to mislead his readers that he's in tight with this John, which he's not. But who would it, like he says, want his readers to believe that he was just at this sit down, word for word. And in this ridiculous sit down, it has me as this vicious Dover potential and John Jr., the shivering, a shivering chihuahua. And it don't work like that. I'm a vicious government pincher abusing that John Jr., who's the chihuahua. There's a reason they call these people friends. They're friends. These sit-downs are done in the gentleman's fashion. There's no screaming, there's no yelling, there's no threats. For I don't know where this Phil Caldo comes up with this nonsense. And evidently, people out there that actually believe in this nonsense. Now, all right, let's hold off on this, and I'll talk with you, and we'll see what else you want me to talk about. But I think I'm covering all the facts that this guy, Phil Caldo, is a joke. For example, I think I made my point clear. He has basically he has Britain as his Sodom and Gomorrah of Brooklyn. All the women are hoopers. All the cops around the take, they're corrupt. All the clubs are opium dens, and we have Phil Caldo running up and down in his wheelchair on Avenue U exposing everything. Give me a break. If you believe that, I got a bridge in Brooklyn for sale. And you know what? I also got some oceanfront property in Arizona for sale. This is goddamn ridiculous, that anyone even believe this goddamn nonsense. Any other questions you want to ask? I think I covered that book. I don't think there's too much more that I can't about tearing into Phil Caldo. What is jokes? I don't know. No, I think you got him. What about that? Tell everybody about that A-Light guy. You mean Johnny A-Liar? Yeah, Johnny A-Liar. Tell us about him. Johnny A-Liar. I don't know this guy, Johnny A-Liar. I don't know him. I never met him. I don't know him. And even my rat, Frank Ganji, came to my defense. Hold on, Johnny A-Liar, a fraud and a phony. And he said